A hospital emergency brought out my husband's true colors. As I, a lawyer, woke up, he said, "You're useless." I smiled. "We'll see." I filed for divorce, and he lost everything. "You're the useless one," I said, walking away with his money. "You." Know how they say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst? Well, turns out a hospital room is where masks come off faster than a NASCAR pit stop. I'm talking about the kind of moment that changes everything, when your whole world flips upside down like a Jeep on a backwoods trail. So there I was, lying in this sterile hospital bed that smelled like bleach and broken dreams, hooked up to more machines than a Ford assembly line. The beeping was driving me nuts, but hey, at least it meant I was alive, right? I'd been out cold for 3 days after what the docs called a significant cardiac event. Basically, my ticker decided to throw a tantrum at 32 years old. Go figure. The whole thing started during what should have been a routine Tuesday morning. I was prepping for a major case, some corporate bigwig trying to screw over his employees' pension fund. You know the type, probably drives a BMW and thinks, Starbucks is a personality trait. Anyway, I'm at my desk with my usual Dunkin' coffee, going through depositions when bam! Chest pain hits me like a freight train carrying concrete blocks. Next thing I know, I'm waking up to the sound of my husband's voice. Now, you'd think after being married for 5 years, the first words out of his mouth would be something like, "Thank God you're okay," or "I was so scared I'd lose you." Maybe even a simple, "How are you feeling?" But nope. This dude, this absolute specimen of human disappointment, looks me dead in the eye and says, "You're useless." I kid you not. Those were his exact words. Not even a good morning or welcome. Back to the land of the living. Just straight up told his wife, who'd just survived a heart attack, that she was useless. The audacity of this man could power a small Texas town for a week. Now, here's where it gets interesting. See, most people might have broken down crying or started yelling. But me? I've been practicing law for 8 years, specializing in family court and divorce proceedings. I've seen every flavor of marital drama you can imagine, from the vanilla. We grew apart to the rocky road. He spent our savings on cryptocurrency and energy drinks. So when life handed me this particular curveball, I knew exactly how to swing. I just smiled. Not a fake smile, mind you, but the kind of smile you get when you realize your opponent just showed you their entire hand in a poker game. "We'll see about that," I said, my voice probably sounding like I'd been gargling gravel, but the message was crystal clear. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support so far. Just wanted to let you know I'm documenting everything as it happens. The nurses have been absolute angels, and my doctor says recovery is going better than expected. But here's what's really got me fired up. I found something in his jacket pocket that changes everything. Should I confront him directly, or play it smart and gather more evidence first? The thing about being a divorce attorney is that you develop a sixth sense for detecting marital red flags. It's like having supernatural powers, except instead of fighting crime, you're uncovering hidden assets and catching cheating spouses. And let me tell you, my husband was throwing up more red flags than a communist parade. First off, there was his reaction to my heart attack. Normal people don't call their hospitalized spouse useless. That's not grief or stress talking. That's someone showing you who they really are when they think you're vulnerable. But it gets worse. While I was pretending to sleep later that afternoon, I overheard him on the phone in the hallway. "Yeah, she's finally awake," he was saying to someone. "Look, if this thing goes south, I need to know my options. What happens? To the house? The business accounts?" Then he laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Well, at least she won't be able to work those crazy hours anymore. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise." A blessing in disguise? My heart attack was a blessing in disguise because it meant I couldn't work as much. This man was literally calculating the financial benefits of his wife's medical emergency like he was running numbers on a quarterly report. But wait, there's more. The next morning, while he thought I was still groggy from pain medication, he starts going through my purse. Not looking for chapstick or gum. This fool was checking my phone, going through my work files, even counting the cash in my wallet. When one of the nurses walked in, he pretended he was organizing my things to help me feel better. The nurse bought it, but I saw right through that performance like cellophane wrap. That's when I knew I had to play this smart. See, the beautiful thing about being married to someone for 5 years is that you know all their secrets. And my husband had some doozies, like the fact that he'd been using our joint credit cards to fund his little side business, a food truck, venture that was bleeding money faster than a cut artery. Or how he'd been telling his friends that my job was just a hobby and that he was the real breadwinner, even though I was pulling in twice his salary. The man thought he was married to someone helpless. He figured that because I was lying in a hospital bed, I was somehow diminished. What he didn't realize is that being a successful attorney means you can work from anywhere, even a cardiac unit with Wi-Fi that's slower than dial-up internet. So, while he was out getting what he called a real meal, apparently hospital cafeteria food wasn't good enough for his refined palate. I was on my laptop doing what I do best. I started by securing all our joint accounts. See, here's a fun fact about marriage law that most people don't know. If you suspect your spouse is planning to drain joint accounts, you can legally protect those assets by moving them to a secure account, as long as you document everything properly. Next, I called my colleague Janet, who specializes in forensic accounting. Janet's like a bloodhound when it comes to sniffing out hidden money, and she owed me a favor from when I helped her sister with a custody case. Within 2 hours, she'd uncovered a whole web of financial shenanigans that would make a politician blush. Turns out my loving husband had been siphoning money from our joint savings account for months, using it to fund not just his failing food, truck business, but also a whole bunch of other questionable investments. We're talking about cryptocurrency that turned out to be as fake as his concern for my health, some kind of multi-level marketing scheme involving energy drinks, and get this, he'd bought a timeshare in Florida without telling me, a timeshare, in 2024. The man was making financial decisions like it was still 1995, and people thought Blockbuster was a solid investment. Update. The evidence keeps piling up, and honestly, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Found out he's been lying about way more than just money. My heart is racing, probably not great for recovery, but whatever, and I'm torn between confronting him now or waiting until I have absolutely everything. Also, his mother just showed up at the hospital, and let's just say the apple didn't fall far from the tree. How do I handle family members who clearly knew what was going on? But here's where it gets really juicy. While I'm building my case from my hospital bed like some kind of legal superhero, my husband decides to double down on being terrible. He comes back from his dinner break with this concerned husband act, talking to the nurses about how worried he is about my ability to handle stress when I get home. She's always been a workaholic, he tells them, shaking his head like he's genuinely concerned. I'm afraid she'll push herself too hard too soon. Maybe it would be better if she took a longer leave of absence from work. You know, really focus on recovery. The nurses are eating this up, thinking he's this devoted husband who just wants what's best for his wife. But I'm lying there thinking, this dude is literally trying to sabotage my career while I'm recovering from a heart attack. The sheer audacity was almost impressive in its complete lack of humanity. That's when his mother shows up. Now, I should mention that my mother-in-law never liked me. From day one, she made it clear that she thought her precious son was settling by marrying someone who worked too much and didn't know how to be a proper wife. She'd make these little comments about how I should be home making dinner instead of playing lawyer, and how her son deserved someone who would take care of him properly. So when she walks into my hospital room and the first thing out of her mouth is, well, maybe this will teach you to slow down and focus on what's really important, I knew exactly where my husband learned his charming bedside manner. But here's the thing about people who underestimate you, they tend to get sloppy. While my husband and his mother are in the hallway discussing my condition and what it means for their family's future, I'm texting with my legal team like I'm running a war room operation. My paralegal, Mike, is a former Marine who treats legal battles like military campaigns. Within hours, he'd organized all the financial evidence, documented every suspicious transaction, and even found some social media posts where my husband was bragging about his investment strategies to his buddies. Apparently, he'd been telling people at his weekly poker game that he was diversifying our portfolio without mentioning that he was doing it without my knowledge or consent. The cryptocurrency thing was particularly hilarious. He'd invested $12,000, our money, into something called Moon Dogecoin because his buddy at work said it was guaranteed to make us rich. This is the same buddy who once tried to convince people that putting pineapple on pizza was a war crime, so his financial advice was about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. But the real kicker came when I started digging into his phone records. See, one of the benefits of being married is that you're usually on the same phone plan, which means I had access to detailed billing information. And let me tell you, those records told a story that would make a soap opera writer jealous. Turns out my devoted husband had been having regular phone conversations with someone named Ashley. Now, Ashley could have been anyone, a business partner, a friend, his hairdresser. But when you're making 40-minute phone calls to the same number at midnight while your wife is working late, and when those calls started increasing in frequency, right around the time you began acting distant and secretive, well, it doesn't take a detective to connect those dots. I had Mike run a reverse phone lookup on Ashley's number. Turns out she works at the marketing company that was supposedly helping with his food truck business, the same food truck business that was hemorrhaging money like a busted fire hydrant. Suddenly, all those business meetings and networking events that kept him out late started making a lot more sense. Update. This is it, everyone. Tomorrow morning, I'm being discharged, and I've made my decision about how to handle everything. The evidence is overwhelming, and honestly, I'm almost impressed by how thoroughly he managed to mess up his own life. His whole family is about to find out exactly how useless I actually am. Any guesses about what his reaction will be when he realizes what's coming? So there I am, 3 days into what was supposed to be a week-long hospital stay, with enough evidence to bury my husband's financial credibility so deep it would need archaeological excavation to find it again. The nurses were amazed at how quickly I was recovering, but honestly, nothing motivates healing like the prospect of sweet legal justice. The morning of my discharge, my husband shows up with this fake concerned expression, carrying a sad bouquet of grocery store flowers that looked like they'd been picked from a gas station display. "Ready to come home, honey?" he asks, like he hasn't spent the last 3 days planning my professional funeral. "Absolutely," I said, smiling that same smile I'd given him when he called me useless. "I can't wait to get back to normal life." What he didn't know was that normal life was about to get very interesting very quickly. See, while he was playing the devoted husband role for the hospital staff, I'd been busy, not just gathering evidence, but actually filing papers. Because here's another fun fact about being a lawyer. You know exactly how long everything takes, and you know how to expedite processes when necessary. By the time we got home, the divorce papers were already in motion. I'd filed for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences and financial misconduct. I'd also filed for immediate asset protection, freezing all joint accounts pending investigation of unauthorized transactions. And here's the beautiful part. I'd done it all while he thought I was too weak and medicated to function properly. We walk into our house and he's still playing this caring husband charade. "Let me help you to the couch," he says. "You should rest. Maybe I'll order some Chinese food for dinner. He's being so solicitous, it was almost comical. Like watching someone try to sell a broken car by talking really loudly about how shiny the hubcaps are. That's when there's a knock at the door. My husband goes to answer it, probably expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor checking on my health. Instead, it's a process server with an official envelope and a very serious expression. The look on my husband's face when he realized what was happening was absolutely priceless. It was like watching someone bite into what they thought was chocolate and discover it was actually soap. Pure confusion, followed by dawning horror, followed by the kind of panic you see in people who suddenly realize they've been outplayed in spectacular fashion. "What is this?" he asks, holding the papers like they might explode. "Divorce proceedings," I said cheerfully from the couch. "Also asset freeze, financial investigation, and a few other legal goodies. You know, the kind of stuff useless people apparently can't handle." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. His mother, who'd been hovering around making passive-aggressive comments about my priorities, suddenly looked like she'd been slapped with a frozen fish. But wait, there's more. Because I'm thorough like that, I'd also arranged for a forensic accountant to audit all our financial records, and I'd reported the unauthorized cryptocurrency investments to the appropriate financial authorities. See, when you use joint marital assets for speculative investments without your spouse's knowledge or consent, that's not just morally questionable, it's actually illegal in most states. The food truck business? Also being investigated, especially since it turned out he'd been claiming business expenses for things like Ashley's marketing services, which apparently included a lot of expensive dinners and weekend strategy sessions at nice hotels. As for Ashley herself, well, let's just say that when someone's married and spending joint marital assets on another person without their spouse's knowledge, there are legal implications beyond just divorce proceedings. The IRS gets very interested in unreported income and gift taxes, and Ashley's marketing company was about to have some very awkward conversations with federal auditors. My husband spent the next hour frantically calling everyone he could think of, his lawyer, his mother, probably his psychic for all I know. But here's the thing about legal proceedings. Once they're in motion, you can't just wish them away. And when you've been as financially reckless as he had been, your options become very limited very quickly. The best part was when he tried to claim that I was being vindictive and that my heart attack had affected my judgment. His lawyer actually suggested that as a defense strategy. Can you imagine? "Your Honor, my client's wife is only divorcing him because she survived a major medical emergency and realized he was a terrible person. That's like claiming someone's only mad because they found out you were stealing from them." Within 2 weeks, the full scope of his financial misconduct was laid bare. The cryptocurrency losses, the unauthorized business investments, the hidden timeshare purchase, the questionable marketing expenses, all of it documented and quantified. The man had managed to lose or misappropriate over $40,000 of our joint assets while pretending to be a responsible partner. But here's where karma really gets interesting. Remember that food truck business that was bleeding money? Turns out the reason it was failing wasn't just because of bad management or poor location choices. The health department had been investigating them for months due to multiple violations, and they were about to lose their operating license entirely. All those expensive marketing services Ashley had been providing, they were for a business that was about to be shut down permanently. The final court date was almost anticlimactic. My husband showed up looking like he'd been living on energy, drinks, and regret for weeks. His lawyer tried to argue for an equal split of assets, but when you've misappropriated marital funds and hidden major purchases from your spouse, the court tends to take a dim view of your character. I ended up with the house, most of our joint savings, and a very generous settlement that included compensation for his unauthorized use of marital assets. He got to keep his failing business, his underwater cryptocurrency investments, and his timeshare in Florida that was apparently located next to a swamp and a defunct theme park. As I was leaving the courthouse, he caught up with me in the parking lot. He looked like a man who'd finally realized exactly how thoroughly he'd destroyed his own life. "I never meant for things to go this far," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a kind of peaceful closure. "You called me useless when I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from a heart attack," I said. "Then you spent 3 days planning how to benefit from my medical emergency while pretending to care about my recovery. You made your choices." "But I was scared," he said. "I didn't know what to say." "You know what scared people usually say?" I replied. "They say, 'I'm glad you're okay,' or 'I was so worried about you.' They don't immediately start calculating the financial implications of their spouse's mortality." I got in my car now, since he couldn't afford the payments on his half-I of the settlement, and rolled down the window. "By the way," I said, "you might want to have a conversation with Ashley about those marketing expenses. The IRS has some questions about unreported income, and apparently her company doesn't have records of providing actual marketing services commensurate with what you paid them." The look on his face was the cherry on top of the whole experience. It was the expression of someone who just realized that their house of cards wasn't just falling down, it was being demolished by a controlled explosion of their own making. 6 months later, I'm doing better than ever. My heart is healthy. My legal practice is thriving, and I'm living in a house that's finally peaceful because it's not full of lies and financial anxiety. I even got a new car, a Tesla, because why not embrace the future when you've successfully escaped the past? My ex-husband, on the other hand, had to move back in with his mother after losing the business, his credit rating, and apparently Ashley, who disappeared faster than free pizza at a college dorm when the IRS investigation started heating up. The last I heard, he was working at a call center and driving a used Honda that makes suspicious noises. His mother still thinks I'm the villain in this story, but considering she raised someone who thought calling his hospitalized wife useless was appropriate, her opinion carries about as much weight as a helium balloon. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about how everything turned out. The answer is simple. You can't feel bad for someone who showed you exactly who they are and then face the natural consequences of their own choices. He called me useless when I was at my most vulnerable, then spent days planning how to benefit from my suffering. That's not a mistake or a moment of poor judgment, that's character. So yeah, that's my story. A heart attack that probably saved my life by showing me the truth about my marriage, and a husband who learned the hard way that calling a lawyer useless is about as smart as poking a sleeping bear with a stick. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering that the person you thought you knew doesn't actually exist. And sometimes the worst thing that can happen to someone else is underestimating exactly how capable you really are. In the end, he was right about one thing: one of us really was useless. He just got confused about which one.